Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Business Builders Podcast. We have a very special guest, Josiah Grimes. Josiah is the voice of Astroflipping. He's the voice that I've learned how to wholesale from. So very, very happy and honored to have him on the podcast. Josiah, how are you doing today?
So good, man. Glad to be here. Yeah, it's a
So
joy to
happy
get
to
to
have you,
hang out.
Josiah.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here.
So for anybody that is not big into the real estate or wholesaling game, give our viewers a rundown of who Josiah Grimes is and why they should definitely be tuning in to today's episode.
Oh man, I don't know about that. They might just be like, "This guy, bro." I don't know. I don't think I feel like this guy. Yeah, man. I think that we've just been really blessed. So we're fortunate to have some really awesome partners and started Keegley it's about 8 years ago. So one of the largest wholesalers in the U.S., which has been just crazy. It's been a lot of fun. We've got a franchise network as well, different, all across all 50 states. And so that's kind of our claim to fame, I guess, maybe in the real estate space. And then married, have 3 kids, one on the way. And that's a joy and just a ton of fun. And other than that, handful of other companies. I get to partner with some really cool people like Pace Mortgage, Mill Damgey, and Russell Brunson, Jack McCall, a bunch of others. On their actual brands where we get to really impact members or students' lives. And so it's been a joy and get to dabble a little bit in tech and a few other things and real estate funds and large multifamily. And so it's been great, man. It's a lot of fun.
That's so awesome. So if you can give us like a non-feed overview of all the businesses you're involved now, because we know, Astro Flipping for wholesaling, sub two, but there's a lot more that we don't know. If you can give us an overview.
Yeah, I'll try to do that and do it quickly without forgetting stuff. Okay, I need to I just need a picture of the logos next to me so that way I never forget stuff. That'd be really great for project management, honestly, for me.
Just logos everywhere, yeah.
Just logos, dude. Originally my my desktop was the logo of each individual company. So that way, I think visual representations are super useful, especially in the real estate game, right? Like having a whiteboard that has active, pending, and closed up on your physical wall means it's a 30%, if not more, increase in your sales team's performance, right? Whereas most people just have that digitally. And it's because you have to look at it if it's there. If it's in the physical world, you have to look at it. Whereas if it's on one of your tabs on your screen, you may or may not get to it. Okay, anyhow. So as far as companies go, we have a company called Movable Type. So I launched this with a guy who's 50,000. This is a normal setup for me. Generally, I'm the way less smart partner. Okay, that's normally how this goes. Okay, so I got to launch that with a guy named Sean Vossler. Really talented. He's talented at a million things, right? So he's a talented author. He's a very talented developer, talented marketer. But that more or less writes books. So he uses AI to write books. So instead of it being, 6 months with a ghostwriter to write your book or 2 years yourself, it'll interview you. You can give it your idea, and you can have your book in 15 minutes, right? So that's Movable. We also launched Prop AI, which is a tech company as well. And Prop AI basically does outbound calls, to your leads to either warm, nurture, or help convert your leads. And so that's been a lot of fun, and it's been really cool to see how that applies to the real estate business, and it's been doing really well. We've got a company called Deal Sauce, which I'm just going to say it's going to come out. It's going to be dope. It's going to be really cool. That's going to launch in a month. Then there's
you heard it here first.
You heard it here first. That's so true. Amen. Then there's Keegley. There's Keegley Franchise. There is New Reach and all of the subsidiaries there, which is what breaks out into sub 2 and breaks out into Astroflipping and credit stacking and prime mover mentoring, which we do with Russell, and a few other things. And then there's the fund. So sub 2 fund, and the network wealth fund, a few other funds. And I think that's most of the big ones. If I have a partner out there that's watching this and is like, Grimes, what the heck? Know that I just wanted to keep it secret because it was so good. That's why I didn't mention it. All right. But yeah, I think that's probably most of them. So
that's so cool. That's insane how many businesses you are involved in.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So I want to ask, among all the businesses, are you playing kind of a similar role across different businesses with different partners, or your role also varies for each business and each partnership?
Great question. So I used to, generally speaking, when I launch a company, I'll be the CEO for at least the first while, right? And so, for instance, at Keegley, maybe the one company that's a little bit different. There's a couple companies that are a little bit different the way that I have them set up, but generally speaking, I'm going to be the CEO for the first bit. But like Keegley, for instance, right now I'm the chairman. Hunter Runyon is the CEO. Hunter's crushing it. And so, whereas at New Reach, I'm the CEO, or in the tech companies, generally I'm the CEO. I'm not the CEO for Deal Sauce, though. That's more a different type of a partnership. And so, just kind of depends company to company, but yeah, it depends company to company. Generally, more of an executive function.
So now you're in like all the different businesses. You're starting new ventures here and there, and I mean at a pretty quick rate. Would you say that when you were starting one business, would you have tried to like get into different ventures, or would you start building the one business first and then start scaling out into multiple different ventures?
Great question. Build the one business first, for sure. Right. So like, yeah, because I mean, it depends on what size you want the company to be, right? If you want to start a bunch of small companies and be a solopreneur in multiple different avenues, you're like, I do a little day trading in the morning, then I do a little real estate, then I do a little forex, then I do a little crypto, right, or whatever, right? Like, that's cool. You know what I mean? And like, you can do that, but you're not. That's all. You're kind of going wide, and it's going to be very hard for you to build teams like all at the same time, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if you have your full focus on something when you're launching it, because the hardest part actually isn't when you're a solopreneur, it's when you're training in that first layer of management, right? Or first layer of employees, right? And then choosing a manager from them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's normally because at that beginning, right, your revenues aren't way through the roof. So you can't hire for experience because you can't afford to hire for experience, which means you're not going to instantly bring in a qualified manager. And so you have to hire for talent, right? But then or for a potential, but then you have to train in that potential, right? And so your hardest part of a company is not when you're the solopreneur, even though it really feels like that. It's really once you have, 5, 6 employees. So you don't have a manager. Now you've got 5, 6, 7 employees, but you're probably still the rainmaker. You're probably still making most of the money. And these people all came in totally green. And the only person they can learn from is you. So you're like, dang it. Like,
Yeah.
now you got to train everyone and you got to make all the money. So, whereas once you get past that hurdle and now you've got a layer of management and then the people that report into that layer of management, and that management has been trained by you and does, 70, 80% of the job that you could do or better. Great. Now you're in a position where if you wanted to, at that point it's working. So you probably want to push in there. You'll get the gains per effort, like the gain that you get, units of gain that you get by units of effort that you put in. You're probably going to get more out of that monetarily than you are if you go start something brand new, right? Like the likelihood that something brand new works exceptionally well is probably going to be lower. So I would say go deep there. But if you wanted to pivot, once you've got that first layer of management that you've trained that's solid, that's when you could say, okay, cool. Now I'm going to go try to do something solo myself over here.
So I want to ask, so when you mentioned, because initially when there's not a lot of profit, you have to train someone with less experience and you train them yourself. Does it mean that maybe later on you can hire someone at a higher level and they can teach you something later on? So does it mean that as a business owner or business founder, you have to know the thing you are doing to be able to teach other people? It cannot just be who, not how.
Oh, great question. Not necessarily. And there's a few different ways that you could get around that, right? So if you're saying like, okay, let's say I'm a business owner and I have no idea how to run the business. Like I know nothing about real estate, but I decide that I want a real estate business. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much
Like,
like, business acquisition, you buy a business, you know nothing about it. In real estate, you know nothing about it, but you want to make it happen. Do you have to learn everything, going through the learning curve first and be good at it and then start building business, hiring people? Is that the process?
Good question. So if you bought the business, right, then if you bought the business, then you should be coming into a solid management team, right, that already knows what's going on in the business, or there's someone there that can be the driver. Then from a business perspective, you can manage the gears. Maybe you don't fully understand the real estate business, but you understand basic project management. You understand how to read P&Ls, balance sheets, cash flow statements, all that fun stuff, right? So you can still bring some business acumen, even though you don't know that particular niche, right? Like maybe you're not an expert at real estate. Like I can't have you comp a property or you can't manage a fix and flip yet. Like you would be able to if you focused on it, you just have never focused on it, but you bought a fix and flip company. If you bought it with the right management, then you really inherited the talent. And so no, you don't need to know. It would be good for you to learn it, but you didn't have to know it at the beginning, right?
What
Whereas I
about
think
you
the best,
building it? What about you building one from the ground, like from the ground up, like not buying one, just building from the scratch?
if you're building one from scratch, then you need one. There's probably, I mean, I'm sure there's some cool diagram that's got it's like 3 points and you have to have at least 2 of them or something like that, right? Like you have to be willing to work really hard. You have to already know it, or you have to have the cash to afford the talent, right? And like you got to have at least 2 of those. And so I don't know if that actually works out. I just made that up, but it's probably right, something like that. So like
It sounded right.
if you're willing to work hard and you've got the money or really if you can afford the talent, right, and you're willing to work hard, then you probably don't need to know much about it because you're going to learn it as you're focusing on it and as the talent or whoever you hired that was already experienced kind of trains you in or you learn from them, right? If you can hire at a high enough level where that person has a lot of drive, right, or you're giving them equity or you're giving them something that incentivizes them and they're really more of a partner, then I think you can actually do it where they have the experience, right, and you're paying them a salary. They're high enough level, they're a self-driver, and they could essentially build the business for you. Is it easy to do that and choose that right person? No. Also, if they built the whole business, they're going to want it. If it's not a partnership, they're going to be like, I built this whole thing. You don't even know how to run this business. Right. And that's not ideal. So,
Yeah.
So when you were building Keeley from like the beginning, what were kind of the role allocations before you guys had any employees? The role allocations between you and your partners, and then how did that like progress as you started hiring, and like some of the major milestones from inception till the Keeley we know today?
yeah, great question, man. So when we first started, really, it was heavily so Jamil's acquisitions, right? Jamil was like head and shoulders above anyone else doing acquisitions, bro. It's bananas. Okay. I think everyone's heard that story where I was like, we did like 2-3 deals. We felt so cool. And then I met Jamil at this party. I was like, yeah, bro, I crushed like 2 deals this month. Heck yeah. Like, how many deals did you do, Jamil? And he's like, this month, I think 14. And at that point, bro, nobody was freaking doing 14 deals a month. Like that was not a thing. Okay. And then you got to like double check. So I was like, oh, cool, bro. That's cool, man. That's really cool. So like, you comped 14 properties. I mean, like there's layers, okay? Like comp 14 properties, you made offer on 14 properties, you got 14 properties accepted, like the acquisition side of things. You sold 14 properties with a disposition, like, they signed an assignment. You actually got earnest on those properties, or bam, they actually closed and you got paid, right? Like there's a big difference. And a lot of people are like, I did 27 deals last month. And really all they did was contract 27 deals. That's a lot different than closing 27 deals. So I had to make sure. Okay. But I also didn't want to offend Jamil. So, I was just kind of like sidestepping around it to figure out. And no, dude, he had closed 14 deals that month. I was like, holy crap, bro. But anyhow, so what it was is Jamil was able to generate a ton of properties on the front end. And then Hunter was able to find leads and whatnot. And I was able to sell. And so it was kind of this combination. And Hunter was also able to sell. That dude sold 50 properties without taking a phone call or whatever when he was like 18. It was whack, dude. It was hilarious. And so it was kind of like this, that was perfect. And then Rahima was really strong on the project management side of things, and also brought some credibility, right, from her different flips and stuff. So when we made an offer, there was more credibility there for the AC agent or whatever, even though we would be wholesaling it on the back end. That was kind of the setup. Jamil and Rahima were bringing in properties, and then Hunter and I were finding buyers and then selling them. And Hunter was managing stuff and I guess Hunter and I and Jamil, everyone was kind of just blowing up title, trying to get deals closed. And that was kind of how it began, right? It was a little chaotic. We organized most stuff on a whiteboard. Jamil had a bunch of notebooks, like red and black notebooks. We just wrote stuff in.
Old school filing system.
It was old school, dude. And we were doing like, I don't know, 20, 30 something deals a month. And so that was how it started. And then I think like most people, if you can get a general hire, or most people will do this no matter what, they'll hire a general hire, right? So or they'll hire an assistant, right? They like hire an executive assistant or something. Like that's normally people's first hire. That's normally not the right hire. I think a generalist is the right hire. I think an executive assistant is probably not the right hire for your first hire. but we called them Oz. We had two Kevins, and so one became Walker and one became Oz. And so we hired Oz. He's dope, and yeah, that was our start.
So that's very, very interesting because the generalist, we're actually thinking of something, we call it solutionist, and we can dive deeper into it in terms of the
Ooh,
differences.
solutionist. That sounds cool.
Yeah, pretty much like a firefighter putting off all the fires, etc. But we'll talk more about that. But I do want to ask, okay, from the initial kind of chaotic team structure to now, you guys each, handle your own division. How do you guys delineate the role allocation for each person along the way? How do you guys have meeting about that? And what's the current role allocation now across different business?
Good question. Okay, so and this is just for Keighley, right? Or just in general, how do we decide role allocation?
If you think there's principle applicable to all business, I think the principle will be great.
Okay, cool. I'll try to do both. So basically, like as you hire out people, reporting lines get all types of messed up, right? If you don't, there's like he said, she said, and your employees are like frustrated because they're like, dude, I don't, or your team members are frustrated because they're like, hey, like Josiah said this, but then Jamil said this, or they got direction from me, which countered what Jamil had just told them or Hunter had just told them, and it's like, oh crap, right? Or they didn't like the answer from me, so then they called Jamil, and then Jamil calls me. He's like, hey man, what's going on? And we're like, wait, hold on, what's happening here? Or vice versa. And so that's, if you're having those types of problems and it seems like there's a lot of drama and more like gossip in your organization, it's probably poor reporting lines. That's one. Two is you might have also just a bunch of young employees that don't have any professionalism, right? So that's not, and it's not that they're not professional. Like it's not that they don't dress nice and they aren't nice people and all that stuff. It's just that they haven't been in a professional environment long enough to understand reporting lines. Like if they don't understand, like I wouldn't step around you like that. You know what I mean? Like people should know what that phrase means. You know what I mean? It's because in a bigger organization, it's like, oh, I know who you direct report to, so I'm not going to go around you and go to your boss, or I'm not going to sidestep you when this should be your call, right? It should come through you. Okay, a lot of people, when you're hiring, when you're hiring people out of college, like they don't understand that. You know what I mean? They just like, I wanted to go talk to the boss and I asked him and he said this, so now you got to do it. And it's like, wait, I'm your manager. What are you talking about?
I totally
like,
feel that. Because my first internship here, actually, my first internship that was still in Philadelphia, and and another intern, and her manager treated her pretty well, like teach her everything, spend a lot of time with her. And the manager is just always leaving me alone and do her own thing, never taught me nothing. Then I go around her to the boss, and then I was fired the second day.
Oh my God.
So, I was still at school, but at that point I learned, okay, although I don't like her so much and she wasn't listening, I told her many, many times, but I should still do it, strategically, diplomatically, as opposed to going around her and to her boss. And her boss was super nice, right? Set me down, give me cookies, whatever, and I was fired the following day.
Oh man! But I think
so it ended up taught me a lot later on when I got into a professional world as like a full-time employee. I definitely learned a lot how to handle those relationships, reporting, and all that.
Yeah, and I think exactly. And so it wasn't like you were trying to do anything wrong. It's just you didn't realize that there was these unspoken rules, right?
Yeah.
I think normally like when you're setting up more structure, so like it's important to talk about the difference between structure and bureaucracy. So like if you look at it, it's like this might be in reverse too. So tell me if it is. But like if you've got 4 people on your team, like how many different ways can those? I don't even know if you guys see those tiny dots, but
We can't
how
see
many? You're like, no possible way. Hold on, here we go. Maybe this gets a little better. But like, okay, still nothing. Never mind. Take it back. It doesn't exist. You can't. What's going on there? All right. So, but like, let's say that you've got 4 people on your team. How many different ways can they communicate? Right. It's like 4 different people. This person can talk to this person, then this person, then this person. This person can talk to this person, this person, this person, this person. You got 4, like, there's 4 people on the team. It's 24 different ways, right? And so if I'm starting new and I'm sitting around a table and there's only 3 other people there, I can pretty well figure out how to disseminate information. It's not that hard. Not to mention there's, for the most part, only one way to disseminate information. It's we're all sitting around the table. I say it. We all hear it at once. And so we're going to use that one the most. Okay, well, when you go to 8 people, now it's 8 factorial, and that's like 40,200 different possible ways, right? And so when your team's 30 people, the way that information can make its way around the organization is now in the millions, right? Like you could say something and it will telephone through the organization, and there's millions of different options for how that can happen. That's bananas, right? So when you bring in someone brand new and you say, hey, know how to communicate, they won't unless you give them structure, right? And so like it's just too hard to make a brand new person has to figure out how to get information throughout the organization, and they've got, a million different options. It's a hard decision, right? And so what narrows that is structure, right? And that's where you get reporting where you can't go talk to everyone in the organization, right? And that's so that you make better decisions, right? Everything flows through your supervisor, so that information that your supervisor needed to know to make the right decisions didn't exist over here and over here, right? And then they didn't have it. They made the wrong decision, and now the organization is shifted the wrong way, right? So the difference between bureaucracy and structure makes us more efficient. Bureaucracy makes us less. So both are new rules. Both limit us, but the limitations with structure make the organization more efficient. The limitations and rules with bureaucracy make us less efficient. And so like we need to, when we're growing our team, that's generally there's a hurdle at some point between, I would say between like 10 and 30 people, right? Where all of a sudden you're introducing that middle management. You can't take 10 direct reports yourself. You know what I mean? And so that's normally around 8. You're like, okay, that's too many direct reports. So we need some managers. And so now like the 30 people start reporting into managers. They're like, why can't I just come talk to you, Josiah, directly? Or John or Helena, why can't I just go to you guys? Like, why do I have to go to this person? I don't like reporting to this person. And so and I used to just be able to come to you. Now I can't. And so now you're experiencing all of that. Those are growing pains, but you had to invite structure to make yourself more efficient, even though it does mean limiting people on the team.
Yeah, and like when you start building out your team, like at first, you're doing all the daily, monthly, quarterly, yearly activities, and then you start hiring out the people that are going to start doing the daily and reporting that to you. And then eventually you build somebody else, and now the daily is reporting to the manager, who's now reporting the monthly to you. And then you can add another layer that's the quarterly, and then you're just hearing, basically there's quarterly reports from your managers and high level managers.
Yeah. And I mean, I really like what you said there, right? And so, as far as the hierarchy of levels of reporting, right? Generally speaking, you want the person that is, like, okay, so like levels in an organization. So this is the other thing is like entrepreneurs tend to just invent titles, right? That we just come up with stuff. Or like, it sounds like, yeah, dude, which is dope. Okay. I like that. That sounds awesome. But we just come up with titles, right? We're like, you are now the chief, most dopest amigo, right? And the person's like, this is awesome. And so with that, there's a lot of really good stuff there, because basically what we're doing is we're making a bespoke or we're customizing our design of our org to accomplish our objective, and we're throwing out any historical MBA shenanigans. We're like, what do I need right now to accomplish my objective? And that means this person needs to do these different things. So the color in these different spaces, I'm going to just call that this. Whereas in pre-built organizations, it's like, no, like this is a pretty well fleshed out position. It feels and sounds like this. This is this. This is this. And it's a puzzle piece, and you just put all the puzzle pieces together. Okay. So both are good. One thing that's important to know is that the general hierarchy, right, starts maybe it starts with specialist, senior specialist, associate coordinator, senior coordinator, like junior manager, senior manager, associate director, senior director, executive director, maybe associate VP. You don't really see associate VP, but VP, senior VP, EVP, then C-suite, right? And so also what you want to be thoughtful of, like as we're helping people grow through those levels, right, is like if they come in as, I don't know, they get hired as a coordinator, but their boss is the CMO. Like generally speaking, you're like in their review, you're like, what do you want to be? And they're like, I want to be the CMO. You know what I mean? Like, that's who I want to be. And you're like, cool. Well, before that, you also could be a senior coordinator, then a junior manager, then a manager, then a senior manager, right? And so they just can see a better growth path if you show them all those things. Okay, Back to what John said, which was really smart. Sorry for rambling, guys. But back to what John said, which is, based on those levels. So you've got coordinators, which deliver the day. You've got managers, which might be delivering the week or the month, right? So let's say manager delivers the month. Then you've got directors. Those guys are delivering the quarter. Your VPs are delivering the year, and your C-suite is delivering 5 years or something, right? And so I think that the best executives are going to they're going to drop all the way down to look at the days every now and then, right? And get in, they should be able to go all the way, dig all the way down into the organization and look at the days. Like there's this guy named Robert Moses, and he designed most of the parks. Some people hate him, but he designed, and there's, I think, some good reason for that too.
I was about to say, why does he sound familiar for a second? And I'm like, oh, right, Robert Moses Park.
Yeah,
Robert Moses Beach. I think it's a beach too, right? Robert Moses.
Yeah. Dude, I think it's like hundreds and hundreds of parks and different roadways and whatever else. Like I think there was one winter, dude, they made like 150 parks or something ridiculous.
That's crazy.
All right, so he managed all that, thousands and tens of thousands of workers, right? But then also he designed like some of the water fountains, like the actual design of the water fountain, bro, in one of the parks, right? Or the signs on the bathrooms, right, for the men and women, right? So that like on the beach, it actually looks kind of cool, or it was congruent with the theme, the thematic of the beach, right? Okay, so that's going all the way down into the details, right? And that's where you can be a phenomenal executive if you're able to plug in at the daily level, but then also come all the way back up and see the broad picture. You're the most effective executive, right? Like you can do a ton. So anyhow, that was totally powerful. A tangent, but you made me think of it when you were talking about delivering, like what they have to deliver and what they should be focused on.
Yeah. So like when they're looking at the day, like they're coming back, looking at basically the operations, but also reviewing like the KPIs of the daily metrics to kind of spot anything, but also looking at, if you're building a project, like now instead of just looking at how's the project going to be finished and what is it looking at, you're actually looking at the plans, or like what are we putting on like the doorknobs and things like that every now and then.
Yeah, and there's also a good distinguishment there too, right? So you've got continuing ops and project ops, right? So projects have a start and a finish, and continuing ops are stuff that you deliver every day, right? And so project ops, generally you're going to manage by timelines and budgets, right? And then outcomes. Whereas the continuing operations, you're going to manage by KPIs, right? And so just like you were saying, like if I'm going to look at a day, you've got quantitative and qualitative metrics as well that you want to look at in that day. And so I'm going to look at stats like, hey, what are our call times today, right? How many outbound calls did we make? This is if I'm maybe looking at like a act guy or something. Like how many outbound texts? What's our text response rate? How many texts do we get back? What do the phone calls look like? Or like how many phone calls out, talk time? Like I want to look at all those metrics, but then I want to listen to some calls, right? So I did my quantitative. Now I'm going to look at my qualitative, and I'm going to listen to some calls. And this is really this is a manager's job, right? But I'm interested in plugging all the way down to the day to look at how the days are being delivered, right? At an individual rep level. And if you could do that, and you could be like, ooh, hey man, I'm noticing that like we're not making these sales calls correctly, or we're not making these outbound calls correctly, or we're saying some different things here, right? Or I read the email copy that we sent and I like this a lot, but this was a little off. Right. If you have the skill set to be able to punch in and be useful at that level, but then also spend most of your time strategizing like, hey, where do we need to be at for like, where do I want to be in 5 years? And what does that look like? And how do I build the teams properly to do that? And how do I move the chess pieces on the board so that we get to the outcome we need, that we get to serve our mission, deliver the good things that we want to deliver to people? One, I think you have more fun. Two, you have a really good handle on what's actually going on in your business. So when you make decisions, they're more.
So yeah, I have two questions here. The first one is you mentioned initially, when you are in the beginning of the business, you hire the less experienced people and then you hire a manager of them, and going up. But also another way of hiring is you hire from top down, because it will avoid the issue from, the person you hire doesn't get along well with the manager you hire, and they feel like they should come to you directly because that's how it worked before. And also just each manager, they feel more accountable if they are the person who hired that new person. So it's kind of like a dilemma, because when you are newer, right, you have to hire the cheapest one, which is from the bottom up, but also it's better to hire from top down. So what's your thought on handling the both?
Yeah, bang on. That is so accurate. So if you can afford, okay, so there's two ways of thinking about this, two main trains of thought. So one is if you can afford to hire someone that's at a higher level and hire them as a manager and have them hire out their team, right? And you really did a great job in the interview ensuring that they can actually perform the duties of that role. So like, again, that's where, this is like oversaid, but probably can't be said enough. If I ask you, are you good at negotiating? Do I know if you're good? And you're like, yes, I'm good. Do I know if you're good? No, I have no idea if you're good. I know that you're confident, maybe that's cool, but I have no idea if you're good. How do I know if you're good? I put you on the phone with the seller and I say, negotiate this deal, right? that's how I know if you're good. And so did you get the deal? And whereas a lot of people, it's like, okay, we won't go that far in our interview. And so what we'll do is we'll say, are you good? And then yes or no. And then we might go to like, tell me some negotiation tactics, and then they give me those. And then I say, let's do a little bit of a role play. And a role play is pretty darn good. Like that is, if you're only going to that level, that's still freaking great. Like at least you're getting a role play and you can hear, do they sound actually good? How did they pivot here? What tools did they use here? Right? How did they structure the conversation? When did they push back on me and when did they let me talk? Right? How much did they talk more than whatever? All those different things. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I actually put them on the phone and they're sweating a little bit and like, oh man, right? Like, and now it's real. Cool. And maybe that's not even a real seller. Maybe it's some dude in the office over here and they don't know it. But then I actually know this person can do the job. Right. Okay. So if you can do that and vet the manager and the manager really can do it, like they listen to some calls and they actually give you feedback as if you're the sales rep or feedback as if you're the AC member or dispo member, right? Then you're like, okay, this person really can do this. Then I think hire the manager first 100% and then they can hire out their team. Then that's absolutely beautiful. If you can afford them and you're like assured that they can do it. So that's one train of thought and I think it's a really good one. The other one on the other side is if I'm hiring in high potential, but they don't have the skill yet, and I'm going to be training them in, right? And this is normally the only reason why you're doing this is for budget constraints, right? Because you're trying to remain lean. And so that's why you're doing 2 jobs at once. Now you got to manage everyone, plus you still have to be the rainmaker until these people are trained in, right? And so with that, you hire 5 shoulder to shoulder. Now you have the opportunity to see exactly how they act and then choose which of those 5 is the most talented, right? That should actually be the manager. And you'll see that naturally because people on that team will go to that person to ask questions, right? They will naturally be the one that finds solutions for other people on the team.
Interesting. We haven't seen that happening in our team members yet. Which means they have no potential for being a manager, I guess.
Honestly, maybe that's it. The other thing too, though, would be how they communicate, right? If everyone's remote, then you won't see most of those questions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's the thing. Everybody's remote and they're just so focused on doing their own thing. Like there's no like office hours or in there because they can't just ping each other. It was happening in the beginning, but I think the more their follow-up pipeline started like kind of building up, the less of a kind of interaction they've had with each other and answering questions. Yeah.
And that's fine. I think if you're running daily meetings and stuff like that, and like there's some interaction there, but the other thing is if they all know how to do their job well, then they don't need a ton of input from others. Yeah,
that's true. So you mentioned as the CEO, the best version is you can have the high level overview, but also go into the day to day and do the quality control and quantity control and all that. So I want to speak from my personal experience because we like do culture index, which is similar to DSCR, but like a lot more accurate with more.
You mean DISC?
DISC, yeah. This personality test pretty much to analyze, your strengths and weaknesses and the personality and all that. And my profile is actually I can do the micro stuff and also macro stuff, which is I can do strategy at a high level, but also dive into nitty-gritty part. But like one thing that I'm running into is, when I'm overviewing at the high level, I can come up with ideas, which is what I enjoy the most. But also I look into like their calls and check their workflow to make sure everything is correct. Like very, very nuanced thing. But the issue is when I notice, okay, there are mistakes, I start panic, like, cause I just cannot imagine how much more I haven't noticed, I start imagine there are so many other mistakes and I get paranoid, I got panic. And then I tend to just either, train them, but like more so I just took it over to fix it. But let's say if you have that day-to-day level and you have managers in between, when you notice there's problem at a ground level, do you tell the manager to fix it and then you come back and check again, or you just fix it completely yourself?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great question. So the general rule is if the manager is delivering 70% of what you would be able to do, then they're good. Right. If it's not, then, you owe it to yourself or your partners or the owners of the company, whatever, you owe to bring that performance at least up to 70%. Right. And so if you're in there and you're like, all right, this is basically it, but there is a couple little issues here and here, and it's within that margin, that 30% margin, I would go back to the manager and be like, hey, here's some stuff, and the general rule is that you want to be, I can't remember who it was that said this. might have been like Peter Thiel or Keith Rebois or something like that. But it's like the general rule is you want to be editing as a manager, not writing, right? And so generally, I would go back to the manager and I would say, hey, here's the stuff that's not working. How would you solve it? Right. And like, okay, cool. If I like that plan, I'll say, go ahead and implement it. And then let's touch base in a week. Let's set up time, 15 minutes in a week, and let's see how we did and if that person's improved. Right. And so if the manager direct reports to you, then it's your job to make sure the manager is performing. Right. And so and the way to see if the manager is performing is to look at if they're delivering the month. So if they're not delivering the month, then I'm especially going to be looking past the manager at the people delivering the days to figure out if that's where the issue is.
So mostly editing, if it's within that 30% error ratio, but if it's something completely wrong, you need to change the whole process. That's when you start writing it again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So like, let's say, yeah, exactly. And there's also just stuff that you'll know is maybe outside of the scope of a managerial role, or it's a little bit, it's a little bit higher level. It's harder to do. And it's a great thing to step in and actually write that and give a demonstration, especially if they've never done it before. If they've never, ever done it before, and you don't think the quality is going to be 70%, like you're like, this might be 35% of what it needs to be, then I would write that myself, and try to do it alongside them, or write it and then provide it so that they could see an example of it. Right. And then the next time it comes around, then I would expect them to give it a shot.
Got it.
Yep. Makes sense. So now, like, we're at a point, and I'm sure you got to a point at Keighley, you went from basically having a very high paying job to then having a business, and you started building it up, right? And you hit that kind of messy middle. So what was like the allocation? Because I find myself, there are times where I want to do like day-to-day activities, but I also am trying to do other things, like now really rebuild our KPI tracker so I could see the numbers and health of our business and really know the numbers of our business, and then do other high level tasks. But so what did you find out is like, what was your role allocation during the messy middle? And then how did you guys kind of get past that? Because I feel like we're at like a part where once we break through this part, the scaling part's going to get a little easier, and we're going to get out of the messy middle. So
yeah, it really does. I mean, that layer of management between you and the people that are making the phone calls, right? So like two things kind of happen, right? And some of it's just the maturing of your team. And I think that takes time, and you're going to speed that timeline. It's more or less talent density, and you're going to speed that timeline by how much time you can invest in training the team, right? But also you're going to speed that timeline on how formalized your training is, right? When they come in, if they don't watch, like if they come in and their training is less than 10 hours, they didn't get trained enough, right? Like that's not enough training. And so coming in and knowing like, okay, cool, you're sewing into every single person that comes in, so that instead of it taking 6 months for them to learn it, they get to learn it in 2 weeks through your training program. That's going to serve you tremendously, right? And a lot of people miss that, and then they're like, why am I always freaking training? Like, I'm like, always training, right? Like, especially with like millennials and Gen Z entering the job force, right, en masse. It's the average time, I think, first off, after college, most people quit their first 2 jobs and then they stick on their third. That's historically what it was. Also, it used to be that like the average time in a job was much longer. Now I think the average time is like 3.1 years. But the difficulty with that is that's for all generations. The younger generation, it's like, year, maybe like like a year and a half. And so that becomes problematic. So you're either always training, right? Because your managers and your people are training over, or you have a set in stone, really effective training program, right? And so I think that you can do yourself a really big service by having constant training programs. And then the other thing would be, make sure you still have an avenue to go one to your whole team, right? So that when you speak, everything doesn't have to go through the manager to the team, right? Where you show up and you can speak to the entire team all at once, or train to the entire team all at once. That will increase velocity of talent density, because the biggest thing is talent density. Once they know how to run it, then you don't have to be involved, right? Now you can actually just focus on the scaling side. The only reason why you have to get involved is because they don't know how to solve the problems, so they have to escalate to you so that you solve them, right? Or they don't know how to maintain culture, so there's cultural issues. Both of those are hiring and training solves.
So basically, during that messy middle time, it's our like responsibility to focus more on the training procedure, the SOPs, make sure that everything is kind of documented properly, so our onboarding is easier. and then making sure that everybody on our team is properly trained so that they're set up for the best success. And then as we start, once we have a good foundation and we start bringing in the right talent, we'll be able to delegate more and more and scale quicker and quicker.
Yeah, because basically, like, you have that core that now is going to know your methodology that's not going to leave, and then you have a lot of people that leave, but like you've passed the tipping point, so you're building that talent density, and once you pass that tipping point, then you don't have to. It self sustains, right? You've got an ecosystem of talent. The people that are there can help the younger people, or the people that are younger in the job, whatever, that come into the job, right, can help them get to the right level, and it doesn't have to be you, because those, you've got that core group of people that can help train in everyone else, that core nucleus that trains in everyone else. And you've got good training programs that trains in everyone else. So like, you want to build to that as fast as possible. The way you do that is good onboarding, good hiring, but then also, or hire for high competency, right? Or ability to learn quickly. And then do one-to-many training often. So like, try to run something every week where it's you for an hour training your whole team, right? And trust me, like, you could say the same thing like 80 times, right? Or you could say something to your manager 80 times and hope it gets to the rest of the team. And then you walk up to someone on the team and you're like, what does this mean? And they're like, I don't know. Like, but my manager mentioned that and I don't really know what it means, right? And you're like, God, gosh, dang it. So make sure you're also, which is okay, that's par for the course and it's nothing wrong with it, but make sure you go one-to-many as often as possible, and really ask questions when you're training. Because then you'll really start to understand where people are actually at, and generally it's lower than whatever the founder thinks.
Yeah, I agree. So John, you want to ask a question about the generalist, and then I can dive more into the hiring part.
I think, Josiah, when you said generalist, you just meant like an admin VA, right?
Yeah, no, maybe it's the same. It's up to you guys. It may come out good, it may not.
All right, I'll ask it anyway, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
So, Josiah, earlier you had said that one of the first hires and one that you would recommend the first hire is a generalist. Can you touch on the generalist, like what they do, who they are, and I guess how you could find one?
Yeah, 100%. So a generalist is someone, you want to try to find someone that's high competency, right? So, or I mean, you can say high IQ, even though that's kind of lame, but they're able to learn new things quickly, right? And that means that you can give them, and generally you're going to give them lower level tasks, not higher level tasks to begin. But like, you're like, oh, we need buyer leads. Like, okay, I need you to do this outreach on Facebook for me, right? In Facebook groups. And you show them once or twice for maybe a couple hours, and then they can do it, right? Like, they figured it out and they can kind of work they can work through it, right, themselves. The one thing I didn't turn off is calendar updates. Dang.
I forgot to do the same thing, and I just put on do not disturb on my Mac.
That's what I should have done. Good call. Yeah. So anyhow, but yeah, so that would be the generalist is able to shift from one thing to the other. If you call them an executive assistant or an assistant, now if you get a VA, they can kind of shift and do whatever, right? If you hire an executive assistant, they expect to book your travel, they expect to do different things, but it's pretty well curated what they think they're going to be doing. Whereas if you're hiring more of a generalist or a coordinator, right, something like that, then you can assign different tasks. And if they're able to learn quickly, they can be really effective, and they get to see a broader scope of the business, and that sets them up to be an effective manager later.
And that's even a higher requirement than just, coordinator or something, because they need to learn quickly, adapt quickly, think on the spot. And yeah,
like when you said, I know that you mentioned solutionist. I'm interested, what's your definition of solution?
Let me tell you all about it. I feel like it's going to be really game changer for me and John. So, because now, not only we're training people, managing the company, managing all the team, and I'm still selling all the deals, we're still hiring the right disposition person. I'm still selling every single deal. That's crazy.
Nice.
But
we've sold 91 as of October 2nd. Helena's probably sold 88 of them.
Let's go. Nice work.
But it's tough. Like, I feel like I don't have time to sell deals, although that shouldn't be my job anymore. But anyways, like, we spend a lot of time in terms of like putting out fires, because things always come up when the escrow happens, right? And coordinating with buyers on things, just all kinds of like drama in the deals coming up. Mm-hmm. So where our day is pretty reactive, always reacting to urgent and important work. Always reacting to urgent and important work. But also, we have like a third party TC person like following up with buyers, but pretty much is we tell that person what to do and that person to say that, to basically copy paste the message to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really like problem solving. Nothing is proactive. It's always, okay, let me fix it after it happened. But
And
if we have,
one thing is because because we have a lot of deals going on, there's a lot happening and there's a lot going on in chats and stuff. So it's very hard for like a third party person not involved in the chat to really, understand the things after the fact. And some people won't communicate through them and still go through us.
yeah,
And me
Yep.
and Helena have to get better at saying, hey, go text that person,
Yeah.
and not react to it.
right. So
Got
it's
it.
pretty much, and all the messages in the Discord channel just keep distracting us, although sometimes like we shouldn't be answering those questions anymore. So solutionist is pretty much a person who is a firefighter who can not only do the TC work, although like later on that will basically hire out the basic TC work to another person, like the paperwork, follow up, the simple one, but more so like TC work in terms of solving problems, putting out fires in the escrow. That's on the transaction part, but also in the day-to-day business, like answering basic question. If this thing from the dispo side needs to be delivered or something needs to be figured out with the X side, they can do that bridge between the cross department. So
and
we
they're
call it,
engulfed in the
yeah,
chat too, so they're always know what's going on, and people could ping them. So like as soon as a deal is in escrow, okay, the point of contact for everything is that solutionist,
yeah. So
right?
pretty
So
much it's like we call it solutionist because they always need to come up with solutions, solving problems, and in that firefighter mode. But that person needs to enjoy that kind of chaotic.
yeah, because right now it's us, and right now putting out the fires. My brother and my dad are both firefighters. I didn't turn into one, but apparently I still am one because I'm putting out virtual fires for deals.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really neat role. I think that it's kind of a twist of just a good senior transaction coordinator. You know what I mean? So they should be able to solve the escrow problems for you, or someone who heads up title and escrow. And then they would obviously interact with other departments very often. You know what I mean? So I think that it's similar to that because mostly what they're solving is escrow problems, right? Like, oh, this one's got a tax lien. Oh, this one was actually underwater, or this one, whatever, right? Like, we need a death certificate. We need a blah, blah, blah. Like, this came up here. The buyer's lender won't fund. We need a new lender. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's stuff like that where what else is in your organization, those problems should be getting solved elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like if you've got a director of dispositions, or let's say that that is your manager in dispositions, heads up dispositions or heads up acquisitions, then I would expect a lot of those to be held there. You know what I mean? And solved there. If you've got a director of operations, I would expect that person to be solving these. And I think that there's some goes both ways too. Whereas if it's just if it's acting dispo reps and then flooding up to you guys, then yeah, I would expect you guys to be solving most of those 100%. So
yeah, we don't have an operator. I think that's definitely someone we want to have later on down the road. But I think for solutionist, yeah, I agree with the act of the sales manager for acquisition and sales manager for disposition. They can solve the problem. Lots of time you need the two departments to come together. And it's not just saying, hey, buyer, you need to chase your lender to fund the deal. Like there's a lot of like brainstorming and game planning how we can strategize to make it happen. So need someone to solve the problem. And also my understanding is for the operator, the difference between operator and this person is more reactive to the day-to-day of the business, but operator is also managing project, people, and system at a relatively higher level as opposed to so reactive to the daily things. What do you think?
God. No, I think that's good. I think it's a neat role. I think there could be something really cool with it. I think that you need to find someone that has really good title and escrow skill set, right? That's also able to solve nuanced problems creatively. And so if you find that person, that'd be really cool. I think that if you find that person, likely they would also do great in roles that bridge DAC and Dispo. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And then you want to choose, is this like a director of ops that you're really bringing in that's sitting? Because the other thing too is depending on if they need authority, do they just need to be able to solve problems or do they need authority? Like, do they need to be able to tell the AC manager or Dispo manager what to do? Right? Like, hey, I know you want to do that. We're doing
That's
this.
a good question.
We're going this way. And so if they do need that authority, then they need to outrank those two peeps. So they would need to come in at like a senior manager level. And so,
That's a really good question.
So that would just be
What do you think? Do you think that person needs authority? I feel like if that person needs to make the decision on me and John's behalf, that person has to have some sort of authority.
So either the Act and Dispo manager are like, man, I don't really know how to solve this. So they have to escalate that, right? And that's going to be solved if this person has good title and escrow knowledge, or if you guys send all of your deals through the same title and escrow company and we find the right escrow officer there, or, or title attorney or whatever that can answer some of those questions and provide useful solutions, then I think there's some utility there. I would say, so there's the title and escrow stuff, which I think Act and Dispo managers can solve elsewhere if they're really pushing for it. Whereas a lot of the reasons why this is coming to you is because they disagree. And so you have to bridge the gap between those two departments. Then this person would need authority. Otherwise, they won't be able to solve those problems.
Got it. That makes sense. So I feel like all we have been talking about is, hiring the right person, etc. And another idea coming to me and John is, because we're constantly hiring for different roles, expanding, and when we get into other markets, because our vision is also to become a national franchise company. And also in the future, we're going to have a private equity company to do business acquisition. So we'll constantly be hiring either for wholesale business or for other businesses we purchase, or for our franchisee, because we do want to provide that service to our franchisee, because people is the core success of everything. So we're thinking it would be great if we have like a headhunting role or headhunter company internally we can use, and also providing service to other people. And I know you guys have like an in-house HR department. So just want to ask you, at what point you decide, okay, it's time that we should bring on a full HR department in charge of hiring, and what are some, the scope of work for the HR department, and what some qualifications when you are hiring that team?
Yeah, well, you've got HR versus talent acquisition, and talent acquisition rolls up to HR, right? And so hiring someone into HR, like an HR coordinator, someone that's going to handle and help with benefits for the employees, also handle any employee lawsuits and stuff like that, or at least help navigate some of that. Make sure that your team is or your managers are being compliant, those types of things, and doing the right stuff. And, helps with setting up cool events for everyone, and, team building, culture building stuff. So like you've got that part of HR, which is not talent acquisitions, and is also super important. And then you've got talent ac, right? Which is more like that person's sole job is to acquire talent, right? Like that's what all they do is hire talent. They're on LinkedIn. They've got LinkedIn Recruiter, and they're going to town, and they use their talent ac software. I don't know why I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
There's a cool ATS maybe for talent ac software, right? There's something like that. And they're using that to help bring in people. I think that you need talent ac if you're continuously growing and you're eclipsing right around 30. That's where it makes sense, like 30 people. You can no longer have your HR coordinator moonlight as a talent ac person, right? Somewhere around 30. You're like, all right, we've got too many open job recs. Whereas if you don't hire more than, I would say like one person a month or one person every 2 months, then I would say you want to try to stay lean. You want to try to keep most of that just with your HR coordinator, right? For those hires. If you don't have an HR coordinator and you don't have talent ac and you're hiring one a month, then like you're doing that's a lot. Right. I would hire someone.
But I feel like it's different role. HR is more like building culture, making sure everybody is comfortable. It doesn't have, I don't know, like the eyes for the talent compared to the talent acquisition person who is proactively going out, maybe even like reach out to people who are working for another company at the moment, but they have the talent and skills that we're looking for, like poach them that way. So I feel like it's different skill set. What's your thought on that?
100%. Yeah. If you hire, it's a totally different skill set. Your HR coordinator is not going to poach people. They're going to post and pray, right? So they're going to post on different things on LinkedIn, everything else, and then hope applications come in.
Exactly. Yeah.
At what point did you guys start working on your HR department?
So we hired an HR coordinator, probably around 20 people, something like that. Yeah. And then we hired talent ac, I think just north of 30.
So for talent ac, what's the background you're looking for?
Mostly talent ac. Yeah. So like background really is, this should not be their first talent ac job.
No,
right?
For sure. Hopefully not.
Yeah. And at that
Got
point, you're a large enough company, you know what I mean? You can afford to hire for experience, right? And so you really want them to be experienced in Talent Act. They should be able to tell you what systems they use, how they recruit. They should have a very good understanding of org charts, and what type of role you might need. So if you describe a role, they could say that's going to be called this. This is why titles matter. Like if you put solutionist on LinkedIn, no one's applying for a solutionist. Like no one searches for that, right? Whereas if you put like senior transaction coordinator, people search for that. And so there's also
Right.
that. Whereas if we want to use a cool title and we have a good Talent Act person and they're doing mostly outreach, then they can say, hey, I see that you've got great experience as a senior transaction coordinator. We have this position opening up that I think is one level above that. It's called a solutionist, and it actually sits above acquisitions and dispositions. I think that you might be a right fit for it. Are you open to having a conversation about it? Then it's a cool title. You're like, oh. But the other thing is you have to think like experienced professionals are also thoughtful of building their resumes. So they're like, okay, when I go to the next job after this and it says solutionist, what are they going to think? Right? Like, are they going to be like, wow, this person's exactly what I need and this is building my career? Or is the next position going to be like, is Fidelity National title going to be like, what the heck is a solutionist? You know what I mean? So like you got like, that's another layer of lens of the person that you're trying to employ. That's
Right.
that's also thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I wish we had like another 2 or 3 hours because there's so many questions we have, especially with building the business we're in right now. But we're coming towards the end, so we have 3 questions that we ask all of our guests, and so we're gonna rapid fire those 3, and we can wrap it up. So the first one is, what are you doing? And I know you're big on mindset because you were giving those speeches on the course. What do you do consistently every day for your mindset to maintain a good, strong mindset and I guess an entrepreneurial spirit?
I love that, dude. I would say question affirmations are really big, right? So instead of just an affirmation, making it a question. So it's not like, I'm a great public speaker. It's like, why am I such a great public speaker? Then your subconscious comes up with the answers and that builds your confidence in that as being a reality. So I like those a lot. And then prayer. So that prayer, little worship action. And I think all of that centered, like, keeps me grounded, centered, feeling loved, and filled up.
Love it. And the second question is, especially for you, because I feel like you become a successful CEO when you were pretty young, like 24, 25 years old or something. Like you have experience and insights way over than what people typically have at their same age with you. So what do you do consistently to build those knowledge and constantly learning and stay on top of the things that you should like implement with your business?
Great question. Thank you. Kind of, I guess, 2 things. So there's that bit in the Bible where it basically says like, ask for wisdom and God will give it to you. So I think consistently ask and seek after wisdom, like ask for it. So that's 1. 2 is read a tremendous amount of books. You know what I mean? Like read nonfiction books. Don't read romance novels, right? That's not, well, you can if you want, okay? But like, that's not making you a better business person. And so try to consume a tremendous amount of knowledge. I think every book is about 10 years of life experience for the author. It took them 2 years to write, and you can consume it in 6.5 hours. I mean, that's a freaking deal. Like you get 10 years of life experience and all you had to spend was 6.5 hours. It's a good gig.
Yeah. So now there are so many podcasts also summarizing. So there are so many podcasts, YouTube videos having the similar information in a pretty condensed way. Are you still an advocate to focus more on books, or you think podcast and YouTube is more efficient for that purpose?
No, I think books are way more curated, right? A podcast is whatever that person thought of right then and there, and they just kind of said it, and you maybe got stuff regurgitated, or maybe it wasn't fully fleshed through, and it was kind of like externally processing. Whereas a book, they spent years and they chose every word in that book, right? If they're a decent author. And so the book,
or if they're using your AI company, then it took them 15 minutes.
Yeah, and then the book is 4 times as good. So yeah, no, then that'll be crazy, dude. Or
Yeah.
it's wild. It seriously is wild, especially when it writes it in your tone and style. It's like, what the heck? But
Do you listen to your books, or you actually read them?
I do both, but I listen way more than I read, or than I actually physically read. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta get on that.
If you have like a book list you publicly can share with people, I think that's going to be amazing, because I remember we went to the mastermind and you gifted me a few books. I finished all those, but sometimes we just want to find, we want to find the right book
to the same day.
No, I wish. So, but sometimes we want to pick the right book that is a good use of our time and also good to serve the purpose we want to accomplish, the problem we want to solve. Maybe. Do you have like a public book list you can share with people?
I don't. I should put one together though.
You should. Yeah,
I think I've built like, I don't know, probably like 3 or 4 book lists just to send to people one off.
that
And
would
I
be
should just
great.
lives forever. So I don't have to, at some point I'll do that. Right. At some point I'll
Yeah.
definitely do that. That sounds like
We'll
a
get
good
on
idea.
Josiah's book list. Send out a weekly newsletter.
There we go.
Cool.
So, last question is: what is one piece of advice, or what you think the most important piece of advice is that you would give to aspiring entrepreneurs or somebody that's built a business that is kind of still stuck in that messy middle?
That's a great question. I would say a lot of people self-sabotage, right? And normally it's because they got offended. Like they feel like someone wronged them. And so then they get pissed at them and then they act weird or something like that. Now, this obviously isn't you guys, okay? So this is totally not applicable to John and Helena, all right? But that's really common, especially with talented entrepreneurs for whatever freaking reason, right? And they just got to knock that junk off, right? Like I've seen a lot of very talented entrepreneurs get offended and then throw jabs, and all it did was close doors for them. Like they didn't get anything out of it. They got hurt, and that's made them offended. So they already kind of lost, and then they doubled down on that and lost again, right? And so I think maybe that. So like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Don't close doors. Like control your emotions. Choose every word you say, and then and don't say bad crap. Like you don't need enemies. You need friends. And then 2, like know that if you're pursuing this, it's probably because God put it on your heart to do it. Right? If you're listening to this, it wasn't because you weren't supposed to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you don't have it. It's probably because you're called to it. Probably, right? It's probably because you're called to it. And so pursue it because that means there's a path there. And yeah, it's hard. Just like going to the gym and building muscles is hard. Just like going on a diet and losing weight is hard. Just like a million other things that you've already done in your life is hard, right? But it's worth it. So do it.
Yeah.
Love
Awesome.
that.
Love it. Such a good episode. Thank you so much for your time, Josiah.
So,
Thank you,
how
guys.
can people reach out to you, connect with you and Keegley?
Dude, that's such a good question. This is another thing I got to solve. If you go to my Instagram, I'm pretty sure it only looks like I have 1 kid. Yeah. And I like have 3 and almost 4. So that's a great question. That's a great question. Maybe at some point I'll remedy that. In the meantime,
Or just reach out to Jamel for, Astro.
reach out to Jamil. Honestly, that's probably the move. If you hit up Jamil, that guy will get back to you for sure. And he's like 4 times as smart as I am. So at least.
So you heard Josiah, flood Jamil's DMs.
Amen. That's the move.
Well, Josiah, appreciate you coming on. It's been great to pick your brain. There's still a lot that we want to learn from you, so I'm sure we'll probably have you on again very soon. So thank you so much. And everybody listening, just keep on building.
Thank you, Josiah.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Awesome.
Bye.
See you.